Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Mother's Day has come and gone, so happy belated to all the moms out there. But the time has arrived for a fast-paced, action-packed hour and change of sports analysis, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And what we have here in the middle of conference semifinals in both the NBA and NHL, and as of right this very second, it could go in two different directions. The NBA could hit an enormous stud, where the NHL could be reaching its zenith. And I'll start with the NBA because tonight is a huge night for the sport, because this could go in a bad direction quickly if the Celtics and the T-Wolves do not come out with victories to even up their series at 2. And I'll unpack that a little bit later on, but I have to start off with the Oklahoma City Thunder, because what they did yesterday afternoon, they have shown that maybe they are growing up, and if not grown up, right in front of our eyes. Because when you think back to last year as a 1 seed and in this round were unable to get that game 4 against the Dallas Mavericks before losing in 6 games. And then after a wild game on Friday night to where it was back and forth, tooth and nail, the big shot there by Aaron Gordon at the end of regulation, which sent the game into overtime. And with a bad shooting performance for Nikola Jokic, and he although had another bad one there yesterday, but this was not on the shoulders of the 3-time MVP. So for the Nuggets to go into overtime and pretty much dominate as they came out victorious to take a 2-1 series lead, and with a quick turnaround in the Mile High City, who knew if the Thunder were going to have it in them to not only stay competitive, which we thought, but to come out on the other side with a victory to bring the series back to Oklahoma City tied at 2. And that they did yesterday. And that wasn't really on the strength of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, although he had a big hand in it in the fourth quarter, scoring 9 of his 27 points. But when they were down 73-66, and it went on an 11-0 run, which was headlined by, of all people, Cason Wallace with a couple of threes. You want to throw in another big 3 by Aaron Wiggins during that stretch. And when they took the lead 75, I believe it was 75-73, they did not look back from that point on. And the Nuggets, who had a golden opportunity to see if they could put a stranglehold on this Western Conference semifinal series, now have to go to OKC, have to win at least 1 game there in order for them to advance, and quite possibly 2 if they do take care of home. But that was a gut check of a win for a Thunder team with a young head coach and obviously a young roster. And maybe they did learn their lessons from last year, what happened in that series against the Mavericks, to where now they put themselves in good shape to at least get back to home court, maybe even take a 3-2 series lead before the scene shifting to Denver. So right off the bat, that was an enormous win. And not only just for the team itself, but maybe even for the franchise, because they do not want to, or did not want to go back home having to face the possibility of a season-defining game where they're going to have to save their season and then have to go back to Denver, even if they did win a Game 5 down 3-1, but then having to go to the Mile High, the altitude, have to play in that arena one more time where you know the Nuggets were going to try to do whatever it took to close out the series. But right now, they don't have to worry about that. So for this young team and coach, that was not only a big win, that was a ginormous win. And let's see where that goes for them throughout the rest of this series, and if they could get over the hump and get to a conference final, which a lot of people expect that to be the case. And as far as the other series are concerned, and all right, let me just get to it. The Cavaliers are frauds. I'm sorry. People could talk about, well, they were hobbled with their injuries early on in the series. And yes, they're not 100% whole. Nonsense. You saw what they did there Friday night in game number 3 in Indiana, where they came out the gate flying. And with Donovan Mitchell putting up his usual performance and with a contribution by Evan Mobley as well as Darius Garland, they steamrolled by the Pacers and certainly left a lot of people wondering whether or not that they were going to get the equalizer last night in a Game 4. And what we saw, I don't know if the Benedict Mathurin confrontation with DeAndre Hunter, where Hunter was pushed by Mathurin in the sternum, and then he went over and literally shoved him to the court, where Mathurin was tossed with a flagrant 2 and an ejection. But for whatever it was, maybe their poise was out of whack, maybe they just weren't in sync, because the Pacers from that point on, and they already had a 12-point lead when that fracas took place, but boy, they went by the Cavaliers standing still to the tune of an 80, get this, 80-39 halftime lead. 41 points. The last time we saw that was in a conference final when the Cavaliers were pasting the Celtics in the first 2 games of that series back in 2017. And one more time, I don't want to hear anything from a Cav fan. And I know I got one that enters the live stream every Wednesday. And of course, for those who aren't familiar, I do have a Wednesday live stream, 12 noon Eastern time on YouTube. So be on the lookout for that as we get to the middle of the week. But for Cleveland, listen, if you lose a Game 4 after winning in dominant fashion in a Game 3, all right, so be it. But to be non-competitive, non-existent, they didn't even get off of the bus or even out of the hotel to show up in that game is an indictment on their head coach, is an indictment on all the players. And I don't want to hear, I know Donovan Mitchell left the game with an ankle injury, MRI today. Who knows what his status is going to be? You think he's going to go for it, knowing that this is a do-or-die game for this team. But I said this dating back to the early part of March and prior to the start of this postseason. A Cavalier team that led from in front all year long jumped off to a 15-0 record, 64 wins, the most ever in franchise history, and that's including teams that were led by LeBron James. And now they're 1 game away from being eliminated in the conference semifinals. And I don't want to hear it. Oh, well, the Pacers are healthy. Oh, well, the Pacers this. Oh, Cleveland that. We weren't whole. We weren't healthy. I do not want to hear it. Again, if they lost Game 4 last night, all right, fine. And even if it was the thing where the Pacers went going away late in the fourth quarter to where they won 129 to 109, and that was the final score, but that wasn't any indication of how this game played out. So, Cleveland, you better stand up and believe as much as you can, or Believeland, whatever you want to call it, because they're going to have to will their team to get past this Game 5 back to Indiana for who knows what's going to happen there in Game 6. You would think that the Pacers are going to run them out of the gym. But that was just as pathetic and as putrid of a performance that you've ever seen for a team coming off of a big-time performance there on Friday night. And again, who knows what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell. If he's not going to play, you can pretty much forget it. Put curtains on them, because that is going to be it for the Cavs. And yes, is it going to be bitter? Without question. Because do you think this team's going to win 64 games next year? They did it this year. Give them all the credit in the world. But that doesn't win you anything. It got them a 1 seed. And that 1 seed right now is going to go bye-bye, considering that this performance last night and on the heels of just an eyesore of a game, let's see if they have any pride, any moxie, any fight to at least live to see another day in a Game 5 tomorrow night. And then you have the 2 other series that right now have only played 3 games, and after tonight they'll have 4 games in the books. And I'll start off with the first one being the Boston Celtics, because that was a big-time performance and no surprise. I thought they were going to come out like gangbusters, similar to the way the Cavaliers did on Friday night, and they pretty much led from in front, 20 for 40 from 3. Do the math, that's 50%. And they literally blitzed the Knicks out of the Garden in a rocking chair type of game that I was hoping for. 115-93. The Knicks were no threat by any stretch of the imagination. And now that leads to tonight, which is going to be a pivotal Game 4. And I think the winner of this game tonight is going to win the series. And that's right. Even if the Knicks do go up 3-1, do I think the Celtics could come back and win? Absolutely. But is it likely for that to happen, considering that the Knicks will have 3 games to play with in order for them just to win 1? Now, granted, they don't want to go back to Boston and win a Game 7, but I'm sure they fear, despite the fact of the ineptitude of the Celtics in the first 2 games, which we all know if they would have had 2 3-pointers in one game and just another in game number 2, they'd be up 3-love in the series. And the Knicks have not shown, a reminder to their fans out there, they have not shown their dominance. They have not imposed any will on this Celtic team. And the Celtics have literally left the door open for them in order for them to barge through in games 1 and 2 to come back and win those games. So, and I'm not saying that to be delusional. That is a fact. And if the Celtics are going to continue to shoot anywhere close to 40% from here on out the rest of the series, the Knicks have no shot to win. Because you know the Celtics are going to play defense. You know they're going to step up their game knowing that they're going to knock down threes and have that advantage in their back pocket where the Knicks shot terribly from 3 in game number 3. And even if they do shoot the lights out of the ball, and that's the only way they're going to win these games, similar to what we saw last year, if you recall, in the opening round, where the Heat shot a record 23 3-point shots in winning game 2 before losing in 5 in that first round series. So unless the Knicks are going to put up prolific numbers on the 3-point line, then I'll say it, they have no shot to win this series. But if the Celtics happen to fall back to those terrible habits and they're going to rely on threes and they're not going to be able to score for stretches at time, then the Knicks are going to have a shot to win this series. But I think the Knicks, based on what they've been able to do so far with their guile, their guts, and grit, I think they'll probably squeeze out another win. Is it going to be tonight? I'm going to say no. I think the Celtics now are cooking with gas. You heard it there in the postgame with what they said. They had to go into the darkness in order for them to see that light, and maybe they've seen the light, but they're still a game behind in this series. So if the Knicks are going to win tonight and have any shot to win this series, they have to do so this evening. And that's why tonight it's fascinating to say the least. And even though they'll play tonight as well as Wednesday night, so when we reconvene on Thursday, they'll have 2 more games under their belts, and we'll be looking ahead for Game 6 on Friday night. So to me, that is the one series that is really going to bank on whether or not this second round is going to end up either being thrilling or could end up being a complete thud. Because the nightcap tonight between the T-Wolves and Warriors, who knows? That is going to be one where Jimmy Butler, even with his 33 points, although on 26 shots, he's going to need to put up even more points because Buddy Hield has come back to earth. The 9 for 11 in the Houston series and the big performance in game 1, where have you gone? All right, he's put up 15 and 14 in games 2 and games 3, but that's not going to be enough considering that Steph Curry is not going to walk through that door anytime soon. Now, it's going to be interesting because after tonight, them down 3-1 and what his status will be moving forward, they did say it was going to be at least a week before they reevaluate. So the Warriors, they need to win the night if they have any shot. And that's not going out on a limb to win this series. Now, with the way Anthony Edwards has played, 36 points there in game 3, on top of what they did there in game 2 as they blew out the Warriors at home before going to the Bay Area and doing what they did on Saturday night where, like I mentioned, Ant-Man had 36, and then Julius Randle, who had a big game 2 as well to get them back in the series. And then what? A triple-double? That came out of nowhere. Nobody was expecting Julius Randle to have that type of offensive output to the tune where now that the Warriors are certainly up against it, and I don't know if they're going to have anything left in the tank. Maybe some pride, another rejection by Draymond Green, and he's going to have to show up here at some point to give them at least double digits, maybe a few 3-pointers from the start just to get the crowd and maybe get the offense flowing. And that's asking a lot from a guy who is not a big-time offensive player. But we have seen that with them throughout the course earlier in the series and even a little bit in the previous series against the Rockets. But yeah, I have to really think that with the way that the T-Wolves are playing and the confidence that Anthony Edwards has, and even Julius Randle for that matter, and their size and just their length and their physicality is going to be too much for the Warriors to bear at this point. That could be a 3-1 series in a heartbeat, probably sometime around halftime, maybe early third quarter of the night. So I hate to say it, the NBA is going to bank on big time for the Celtics to even that series because at least they'll have 2 series that will be at even strength where we know the Cavs are looking for to be executed there tomorrow night. And if the Warriors do not show up and come out victorious in their game tonight, and also face a 3-1 series deficit, you're going to have some quick series here. And if the Celtics happen to lose tonight, and even though that could go 7, but I'm sure Adam Silver, by the time he gets to midnight, the Oreos and the almond milk are not going to go down smooth if they're going to look at 3-1 series deficits before it's all said and done. And I get it. OKC Denver, that could go 7. I think it's probably going to go 6. And I think I predicted, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. I did pick OKC to win in 6. So right now it's going as planned. But you have to think that if the Celtics are not victorious tonight and somehow, some way lose, it could be a very quick exit for some of these teams, if not 3 of those teams, before you even get to the weekend. And the NBA, they're going to want their series extended as far as Friday and maybe even to Saturday and Sunday for that matter. So that we'll have to wait and see. So the games have been not competitive. I mean, think about it. OKC Denver aside. That I'll put aside. Minnesota's taking care of Golden State. The Celtics, from the last time we spoke, took care of the Knicks there in the one game that we've seen here since Thursday. And then, obviously, the scenario with Cleveland and Indiana. No contest for Indiana on Friday. And then last night we know about the Cavaliers. So let's see where this is all going to unfold here over the course of these next 3 days. And I'll go through the schedule in a matter of moments. But a couple other newsworthy notes that are important. Tonight, unlike last week when I knew it was the NHL draft lottery and the Islanders got the number 1 pick overall, which was a shock. The NBA draft lottery is tonight prior to the Knicks-Celtic game tonight at 7:30, which that'll be on ESPN as well as the Wolves and Warriors ESPN doubleheader. It's fascinating to see because who will get the chance, in all likelihood, at number 1 to draft Duke's Cooper Flagg, who, of course, is now foregone, I should say, his final 3 years in college. No shock there to go into the NBA. And the 3 teams that I'm looking at here, let me even pull up the draft order, so to speak, because although it has to be by lottery, but just the odds of these teams and the likelihood of getting the number 1 overall pick. So you have Utah that had the worst record, Washington and Charlotte, those 2 teams follow suit. All have a 14% chance to get the number 1 pick overall. Then you have New Orleans, 12.5. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Philadelphia, 10.5% chance, followed by Brooklyn at 9%. And then 2 spots below that is San Antonio. The reason why I bring up those 3 teams, Philadelphia, which they need an infusement in the worst way, or infusion, excuse me. Let me enunciate and even speak a lot better than infusion of young talent, considering that they're getting long in the tooth. I understand Tyrese Maxey, young player. You want to throw in Jared McCain, their first-round pick from this year. All right, fine. But Embiid, we don't know what he's going to be as far as his health moving forward. And Paul George, I believe, will be 35 as of next year. So if they somehow, someway get Cooper Flagg, that will be a huge boon for the Sixers. Then you have the Brooklyn Nets. Remember, they got all those number 1 picks dating back to the Phoenix trade. And I understand they had to get a surplus back when they talked about the James Harden trade. But for them, with the Knicks, the 5 first-round picks, which will start up this year, as well as, I believe so, as well as an opportunity to maybe even, dare I say, steal the spotlight in New York as far as maybe them getting Cooper Flagg, a generational player, onto their team, that would be enormous. And then on top of all that, could the basketball gods shine on San Antonio once again, dating back many moons ago to Tim Duncan? And then, of course, they did get Victor Wembanyama a couple years ago, but then now could they even think that the basketball gods and the ping pong balls go the way by the San Antonio Spurs to where they'll have not only Victor Wembanyama but Cooper Flagg on the same team? Who knows? But those are the 3 teams that I'm looking at that could possibly. Now, mind you, Brooklyn has a 9% chance and San Antonio a 6% chance. But the Islanders, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, they had a 3.5% chance of getting the number 1 pick, and they were in the vicinity of drafting 10th overall. And as I mentioned, they'll be the team that is going to select first in their draft sometime in late June. Could it possibly be the same for the aforementioned Sixers, Nets, and even San Antonio Spurs? And maybe even the Phoenix Suns I might add, because they have a 3.8% chance considering what their record was throughout the course of the regular year, and even the Mavericks, you want to throw them in the mix. But because Philly, Brooklyn, and San Antonio are ahead of them, that's why I choose them in particular. Well, we'll watch with bated breath prior to Celtics Knicks tonight to see where those teams will fall in the pecking order as far as the NBA draft lottery is concerned. And then some news coming out earlier this morning that Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course, the superstar player of the Milwaukee Bucks, now may be looking at his options of moving elsewhere based on him having conversations with the front office. That's not to say a deal's in place. That's not to say that they have the inner workings of a deal that's going to be forthcoming. But for Giannis, who's been there 12 years, we know he won a championship there in 2021, and with 3 consecutive first-round exits, and knowing that the team does not have any draft capital or any players that are going to come on the horizon that are going to change the fortunes of this team. We know that Damian Lillard is probably not going to play at all next year because of that Achilles that he ruptured during the postseason, and there is no help on the horizon. Who knows? Now, this is the early stages of this. I don't know if Giannis has already picked teams or selected, but he is open-minded to possibly being traded. Where he goes, way too early to tell. I'm sure Pat Riley's going to do whatever he takes or whatever it takes for him to procure the services of Giannis Antetokounmpo. But they don't have a lot of draft capital themselves, and they're not going to trade away Tyler Hero or Bam Adebayo. Those are his 2 biggest assets. And I don't think that the Duncan Robinsons or the Terry Roziers, I understand he may be an expiring contract, but that guy's been linked to maybe throwing games, and I'm sure there's no team that's going to want to touch him, among a couple of other guys that are on the team that I'm sure nobody has any interest in. But you do have teams like the Rockets that have a surplus of young talent and draft picks, as well as Oklahoma City, as we know. And could you imagine Giannis on Oklahoma City, an already stacked team? I tell you. Now, again, way too early to even unpack this, but the ball may start to roll here as far as where Giannis may go, and a lot of that talk will probably come deeper into this postseason, probably into the finals, and certainly once the finals conclude, and as we get set for the NBA draft as well as the NBA free agency. So that's what I have there with the NBA. Let me now move on to the other fall and winter sport with the NHL, and that is on the rise here because you have series that have been tooth and nail, series that certainly have changed on a dime, and I'll go back to yesterday, and I'll start there with the Toronto Maple Leafs because the Maple Leafs jumped off to a 2-0 series lead, or jumped off, excuse me, to a 2-0 series lead, and then they went to Florida, and now they're coming back to Toronto, tied at 2, based on what we saw there, and the Panthers give it up. They were down 2-0 early in Game 3. They fought back, scratched and clawed. They actually had a 4-3 lead in the third period before the Maple Leafs tied it going into overtime, and then Brad Marchand, who got the overtime goal, kind of fluky, hit off of a player over the shoulder of the goaltender Joseph Wall, and the Panthers were able to get Game 3, a game that they absolutely had to have. And then last night behind Sergei Bobrovsky's 23 saves, and with the Panthers winning 2-0, I know at the end you had Max Domi hitting Alexander Barkov, which led to a scrum. Now, I don't know if Domi's going to face any suspension or if the league's going to take a look at it. I don't think it was anything dirty or anything that is going to be worthy of the league to review it, but who knows? Because it is a playoff atmosphere and obviously frustration boiled over with the Leafs not being able to get one of the 2 games there in South Florida. Now you have a series where we know the defending champs, and I picked them to win in 6, although I'd like to see Toronto win this series and move on. But now Toronto's going to have to take care of home ice, and a lot of pressure is on them to win that game. Because if they go down 3-2 back to Florida, people are going to think that they're not going to make it out alive. And even worse, even if they do win on the road to go back to Toronto for a Game 7, you can't 100% trust them to win that game. So right now, the Maple Leaf fans, I'm sure they're on pins and needles, and they've seen this movie and been down this road before. You could only hope that they can win a game number 5 tomorrow night. And do I think they will? I don't know. Right now, I can't even tell you. I hope they win. I want to see them win. And you know what? The hell with it. They're going to win. I don't know how. I don't know if it's going to be in double overtime or they're going to win comfortably. a la 4-1-5-2, but I'm going to think that they're going to find a way. This is not the previous teams, although the same core is there, but with the head coach, Craig Berube, who has won a Stanley Cup, and I'm sure he is probably angry and frustrated, but I'm sure he's going to get the most out of his guys with practices and early morning skates to where he could corral his team to say, hey, now it's best of 3. We have the home ice. Let's take care of home ice tonight. And we'll worry about having to go back to Florida, whether we're up or down 3-2. Let's just take care of what's in front of us. And hopefully they will be able to secure that game. But, Florida, they're going to play with house money. They're going to play fast and loose. And I would not be surprised if they come out of Game 5 with a victory and back to South Florida to try to ice that series and move on to another conference final. So that's where you have a lot of intrigue there. Then you have the situation with Dallas and Winnipeg, where last night the Stars took a 2-1 series lead. And I know there could be some controversy where the game was tied and you had the goal there by, I believe it was Alexander Petrikov, or you know me with these names, people. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Yes, Alexander Petrovic, where early in the third period, or just about 5 minutes in, where the puck went off of his skate on a shot by Mikko Rantanen. And to me, based on the replays, I didn't see anything that was egregious or anything that should have been called as a no goal. And I know that the head coach of the Jets, Scott Arniel, said that I've never seen a goal scored like that. That was a bad call, and who knows if he's going to get fined, and I'm paraphrasing there. But what happened there, what was it? I believe at 5:11, and then 19 seconds later, after they scored the go-ahead goal, Mikko Rantanen puts one behind Connor Hellebuck, led 4-2. They tack on another goal later on, and the Stars now have a 2-1 series lead to where the Winnipeg Jets, and in the next series that I'll talk about, it's going to be twofold. Connor Hellebuck, not a good performance again. His ERA, his goals against, I'm thinking he's a starting pitcher now all of a sudden. His goals against average on the road, and he's been pulled in 3 of those games, in the first series I might add, is 6.5, even north of that. And for the Jets, if they're going to survive here, they're going to have to win one of these games, considering that they took care of home ice in the previous series, but we know Dallas already had taken home ice in one of the first 2 games, as we know. And for Winnipeg, now all the pressure is squarely on them. They need to win this game because we can't trust Connor Hellebuck on the road. For whatever reason, Winnipeg has not been able to put together a good 60 minutes away from home ice. And now with Hellebuck, the spotlight squarely on him, they face a must-win tomorrow night to see if they can keep their hopes alive and bring it back to Winnipeg tied at 2. And then on the flip side of that, to go to the Eastern Conference or back east, the Washington Capitals. All right, they won 3-1 there to get the series tied there on Thursday night. Fine, no problem. But what happened in game number 3? Shutout 4-0. Logan Thompson, all right, dude have a bad game. Maybe not a good time to have a bad game, but you have to wonder now the psyche of the Capitals. Similar to the Jets, they played them in front all year long. They've led their respective conferences. We know that the Jets are the President's Trophy winner. But now the Capitals up against it. And now we're going to have to see whether or not and what they're made of here, similar to Winnipeg, on whether or not they can get back to the nation's capital tied at 2. Listen, do I think both of those teams will win a Game 4? I trust the Capitals more than I trust Winnipeg at this point. And the Capitals will play tonight, and we'll go through the schedule. And my bad, I didn't even go through the NBA schedule, so I have to reel it in. And I'll make sure to talk about that when I get toward the end of this segment. But for the Capitals, I mean, this is one where over the past 48 hours, I'm sure they have to stare in the mirror and look long and hard because they cannot have their season go kaput. And as I've said a million times about this Carolina Hurricane team going back the last couple of years as they ousted my Islanders in the process in the first round, this is a team that's not going to blow you away with big-time talent. They don't have megastars like the Maple Leafs have or the gutty, gritty, heart and soul guys that the Florida Panthers have, like Matt Tkachuk and Brad Marchand. This is a far cry from an Edmonton Oilers team that has all-world players like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And even the Vegas Golden Knights, who have had a recent history of winning a Stanley Cup, making it to a Stanley Cup, and have not only star players like Alec Pietrangelo back on the defense and Mark Stone and Jack Eichel, the former Buffalo Sabre. They don't have players like that. But they may not be spectacular, but they are as steady and as complete of a playoff team that we've seen here. So Carolina, they're going to do whatever it takes to try to win a Game 4 in their building to really push the backs to the wall for the Capitals. But now I have to really see what they're made of. And I think the Capitals are going to win. I think they'll find a way. As far as Winnipeg, I don't think they will. I think they could go down 3-1. Although we've seen the Stars have hiccups along the way over these last few postseasons. So it's not as if they're impervious to them not being mistake-free or them not just automatically thinking that they could just skate out there and come out victorious and go up 3-1. We've seen them have hiccups. So it's up to Winnipeg to see whether or not that they're going to be able to push past whatever mental, psychological, maybe to a certain extent spiritual undertaking that's going to have to take place, because they do not want to leave Carolina with a loss. So this is what we have here. And I think it's fascinating to see what's going to happen here tonight. And also, on top of all that, the Vegas Golden Knights, you talk about saving their season. Now they got blown out. I would say blown out. It's a little bit too strong. But Leon Draisaitl in overtime, as we know, in a game number 2, where they really put the Vegas in a pickle, considering that Edmonton won the 2 games on the road in Vegas and had won now 6 games straight until Saturday night, where it went tooth and nail and down to the wire, where in literally the final second, 0.4 to be exact, where the Vegas Golden Knights, and off a deflection by Leon Draisaitl, and I understand he was trying to knock the puck away from the goal line, but when you have Johnny on the spot as the crowd was being cascaded by Vegas Golden Knights, and you had Riley Smith, who was the proponent of that goal where Leon Draisaitl was unsuccessful of smacking it clear of the crease and the goal line as it went into the net, and maybe he gets the assist on top of Smith's goal. But that was an enormous win and gave the Vegas Golden Knights life, because granted that if he didn't score late, it would have gone into overtime. But knowing what happened in the previous game, Draisaitl getting the game winner, the Edmonton Oilers on a streak where they had won 6 in a row, Vegas up against it, knowing that they needed to win that game in the worst way. And guess what? They absolutely did. And now Edmonton, who has had these moments, maybe not so much this postseason, but over the years, where they've been able to get out of it, especially last year on a magic carpet ride to a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup final. But does Vegas, with their momentum, can they piggyback off of what was just an absolute thriller and an absolute, not only huge, not big, not even enormous, a ginormous win for this hockey club? Now, can they do it again? Can they come back, maybe play from in front and keep the lead at bay and maybe stick to the formula of not letting Edmonton come back, which I understand is very hard because of all the firepower that they have. But that, again, maybe the momentum could build. And remember, for the Oilers, no Calvin Pickard, who had a lower body injury, and you had Stuart Skinner fill in. Now, I don't know the status of Pickard, who had to fill in for Stuart Skinner in the first round against the Kings. So the status of Pickard moving forward right now is questionable. So for Skinner, he's going to have to pick up his game big time in order for Edmonton to not only go up 3-1, but if they want to win this series, he's going to really have to, I don't want to go as far as saying standing on his head, but maybe that could be just a little crack in the door for the Golden Knights to barge in and maybe tie the series before going back to Sin City tied at 2. So that is also fascinating, to say the least, to see how that's going to shake down there in the conference semifinals. So when we take the big picture look, you have Toronto and all of their just checkered past when it comes to not making it past the conference semis or making it to a Stanley Cup final, etc. And of course, the Panthers trying to get back to a third straight Stanley Cup final. We have both the Capitals and Jets already in deficits, down 2-1. Both top teams in their conference. How are they going to prevail? Will they be able to get the equalizer and go back home with the home ice advantage on their side? And then with Vegas winning in just grand fashion in the final second of Game 3, can they piggyback off of that and try to get themselves back home tied at 2? That's where the NHL is on the way up. And unfortunately, the NBA conference semis could be on the way down after tonight. And that we'll have to wait and see. Now, is there any newsworthy notes? Yes, there are a couple before I get to the schedules in the NHL and NBA. For starters, Joe Quenneville. Remember he, winner of 3 Stanley Cup as the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks there in the 2010, 2013, and 2015 season. Multiple cups. I know I didn't enunciate with plural more so than singular there, so my apologies for that faux pas. But Quenneville, remember, he did coach a handful of games for the Florida Panthers before he got let go because of the scandal dating back to the former player Chris Beach and the allegations of sexual misconduct by I believe it was a trainer, or it could have been an athletic coach on the team, where he got let go. Well, now he resurfaces with the Anaheim Ducks. And that is a big hire because the Ducks obviously have not been relevant here over the last God knows how long. And Quenneville, in his press conference, did state how he was contrite, how he was sorry for what had transpired, and certainly had his mea culpa in front of the press. So he certainly didn't try to push it aside or sweep it under the rug. He did address it. So maybe the media and the hockey world can move on. And we could unpack that and go through that. But again, that is old news. That is over and done with. And for Quenneville, it gets another shot here. Again, when you bring in a 3-time Stanley Cup coach, granted they had some big-time talent on that team, or on those teams, I should say. But for he now to see if he can rebuild this Duck team to at least some sort of respectability, and maybe even bigger than that, to get back to and win a Cup final that they did so in the 2007 season. I mean, think about it. It's been 18 years since they won a Stanley Cup. So we'll see what Quenneville does at that point. And I failed to mention this on Thursday's podcast, but the Utah hockey team now has a name. They are no longer the Utah hockey team. They are going to be called the Utah Mammoth. And that is singular. This is dating back to the fans getting involved and chiming in on what the name should be. And I guess they thought, they being, I guess, the marketing or somewhere in the offices of the former Utah Hockey Club, to where they decided that it will be the Mammoth. Now, I know there were a bunch of names I have to go back and check that were a little outlandish. I know there was Utah Canyon at one point. You also had the Mountaineers, which I guess was a little bit long, Utah Mountaineers. You also had the Yeti, which they were close to using, but because of the Yeti Cooler Company, they had the rights to not only the domain, but copyrights, etc. So Utah Yeti wasn't going to work. So they settled on the Mammoth. The logo, everything is out. Looks good. And Utah Mammoth, all right, maybe not the greatest, but that goes back 10,000 years to that part of the country, to where the Mammoth obviously had led through the Salt Lake City and through the Utah mountains during 10,000 years, dating back of God knows when. Ice Age, who knows now? Of course, now I'm getting out of whack here. But anyway, Utah Mammoth, that is your new team and your new name team for the Utah Hockey Club. Now, as I exhale and get to the schedule here, people, for the NHL over the next 3 nights, tonight, Washington, Carolina, 7 o'clock, followed by Vegas and Edmonton, 9:30. Both of those games on TNT. Standalone game tomorrow, Winnipeg, Dallas, as they try to catch up with the other series. 8 o'clock, ESPN, only game tomorrow night. Then Wednesday, Florida, Toronto, they will play, and they actually skipped them because they would have been in line to play tomorrow night. But I guess, again, to balance out the playoff schedule, Game 5, 7 o'clock ESPN, followed by Edmonton and Vegas. Now, they're 2-1. So, obviously, they're going in order considering they're playing tonight, and then Game 4 there Wednesday night before action picks up on Thursday, where Dallas and Winnipeg, Carolina, Washington, both of those games on TNT, but of course we'll talk about that when we reconvene then. And then as far as the NBA goes, tonight we know about Celtics, Knicks, followed by Warriors and Wolves. And then tomorrow night, Indiana, Cleveland, Denver, Oklahoma City, 7 and 9:30 on TNT. Wednesday night, New York at Boston, Golden State, Minnesota. Again, those games on TNT. And if necessary, Cleveland at Indiana for a Game 6. And we know that OKC and Denver will match up there in the Mile High City on Thursday, ESPN, for game number 6 at that time. So that'll do it with both the NBA and NHL. Now let's move on to the baseball, as a lot of stuff that has happened off the field when it comes to managers as well as in the locker room, I guess you could say, as I get into the batter's box. Now, the managers that got fired, it is unfair to both the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Colorado Rockies that their managers here in the middle of May, or really approaching the middle of May, were shown their walking papers. So Derek Shelton, and I believe he was there, I want to say, off the top of my head, I should know this. He may have been there at least 5 years, maybe 6 years. And for him to be let go, all right, fine, slow start. I believe they were 13 and 26. They have a good pitching staff. We know their offense, a bit from hunger. And could you say it's all his fault? Absolutely not. But I guess they needed a new voice in there. They needed somebody to rally the troops. And I believe Don Kelly is the guy that is now the interim manager for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So, all right, you want to look at that and say they needed a change for a guy like Shelton, who's been around the block for quite some time. They're in that organization. All right, fine. So I'll give you that. Although, is it his fault? 1,000% it is not. So for the other side of the coin, being the Colorado Rockies, now, mind you, Saturday afternoon, they lost by 3 touchdowns to the San Diego Padres. 21-0. To where the GM, Bill Schmidt, came out and said that he was in support of his manager, considering that they've come to the ballpark every day to play. They've shown a lot of fight. They've stuck together, and that he feels that there's still time to turn this around. I get it that he's going to try to say the PC thing, the right thing, etc. But on the heels of an 8-game losing streak, losing 21-0, and then yesterday snapping that losing streak and getting a win under their belt against a divisional foe, what happens? Bill Schmidt walks in the office to Bud Black, the manager, and says, I'm sorry, but out you go. How could one day you could say, I feel that there's a turnaround, the team has fought hard, they've been scrappy, they've fought to the end, etc., on the heels of losing 21-0, and then they win the next day to snap a losing streak, and then, you know what? See ya, wouldn't want to be ya. That is just a terrible job. And I get it. If you have a microphone in front of your face and the media there in Colorado, they're going to say, what's going to happen with the manager here? Is there going to be a word of support or encouragement here? And right, the best thing he could have said there is that, listen, we're going through a rough patch. Buddy Black is trying to figure it out. I know the guys, yes, they can hang their heads all they want, but we are a major league team. We're going to try to put forth our best foot and make sure that we try to snap this losing streak, etc. He didn't have to say, oh, I give all the credit to Buddy Black. They've done this, they've done that. We're going to turn it around. And then you're going to give him the guillotine. That is a terrible job out of GM, no matter how you cut it. And I get it that is another team that is a AAA, maybe even a 4A roster when you take a look at it. But Bud Black, I get it. At some point, he was going to get fired here. But considering what the GM said the day before, and then now, awful job. I'm sorry. So that's what you have with the two managers. And the new manager, I believe you have Clint Hurdle as the bench coach. And I forgot who the Rocky manager is at this very moment. I'll take a look at that right now. So Bud Black is out. And the guy that moves in is, drumroll please. Yes, I know that Clint Hurdle. Oh, Mike Redmond was also out because he was a bench coach. The other guy that's replacing but black, is Warren Schaefer, who was the third base coach. And with Redmond out, remember, he was a longtime catcher, played with the Marlins, was also a Marlin manager for a time back in the late 2010s, I believe, before Mattingly. And now you have a situation where Redmond is out, so you have Warren Schaefer in and Clint Hurdle to be the bench coach. And remember, Hurdle was the, I believe, original Colorado Rocky manager dating back, and maybe not even as far back as that. He probably was the World Series manager in 2017 off the top of my head. Or maybe that was Jim Tracy. That could have been Jim Tracy. But anyway, Hurdle back in the mix, and now Schaefer is your interim manager there in Colorado. And then you have this situation that has been brewing in Boston where Rafael Devers, we know what happened in the course of spring training, where with Alex Bregman being brought onto the team, and of course Bregman playing the same position as Devers, where Devers is now your full-time DH, and even though Devers said at that time, I'm the third baseman, I'm the guy that has been at that position for so long, and I guess after further talking between the manager, the front office, etc., Devers accepted, reluctantly, his role as being the full-time DH. Well, now with Tristan Casas on the shelf, the first baseman for the rest of the year with a knee injury, and them needing a first baseman, now it's a situation where it was brought to the attention of Devers to say, hey, how would you feel about playing first base? And what does he come out to say? Now all of a sudden, they wanted me to go from third base to DH, and that was it. And now they want me to be DH to first base, to where he even threw a shot across the bow at the GM, Craig Breslow, to the point where he even came out and said, I don't understand the decisions of the GM. So that raised the antenna of the ownership in one John Henry, where he had to fly out to Kansas City, where the Red Sox were playing over the weekend, and had to sit down with his disgruntled DH, former third baseman, to the tune where I guess everybody's on the same page now, even though Devers, I believe as of right this moment, still won't play first base. Well, here's what I got to say to Devers. Now, I understand. Third base, he's been there however many years, 6-7 years, signed the big contract, as you know, 10 years, $311 million, or 12 years, whatever it was. I think it was 11 years. And I'm sorry, Rafi, you may not have played first base before, and I get it. It's in season. You don't have a lot of tune-up. You don't have a lot of experience. Well, guess what? Start taking grounders at first. Start expanding your role to not only be the guy who is, let's face it, because considering how much he's making, he is the face of this franchise. And you just got to suck it up. You're getting paid a king's ransom. You're a DH where you had a slow start to your season, although you've turned it around here, 7 home runs, 28 RBIs. Numbers are respectable after a terrible start. But now you can get back into the field, play first base. I get it. It's a lot trickier there. Different corner, etc. But you're a Major League Baseball player. You've played the infield. I can see if you were an outfielder that has never played the infield and therefore, I got to play infield. Look at what Bryce Harper done. He had Tommy John surgery, right field. He moved to first base. All right, is anybody going to confuse him to Keith Hernandez or Don Mattingly? No. But he plays a serviceable first base. Why can't Rafael Devers do the same thing? And you're getting paid one more time a king's ransom. So that's just a terrible job by Devers. Listen, I can understand he's being honest and he's expressing his feelings about, hey, I've never played first base, to do it in season. I don't know if I'll be too comfortable, but maybe we need to have further talks. Do it that way. But instead, he threw the GM under the bus. He came out and said that, I don't know, from 1 second to the next, they want me to play third base. No, now they want me to play DH. Oh, now they want me at first base. Hey, that's just the life of the way your team has gone this year. If Casas was healthy, there would be no way that you'd be in first base. But because you have played a corner infield position, and obviously you're making a ton of money, why not experiment playing at first base, despite the fact you may be uncomfortable? So to me, Devers, you got to shut up and go on out there and play the position. And people can say, oh yeah, it's easy for you to say, JAYREELZ. Well, how many other people I'm sure feel the same way I do? Whether it's Beantown Radio, other podcasts, columnists, sports talk radio hosts, etc. I'm sure I'm not in the minority when it comes to this particular topic. So that's what you have there in that regard. Then you had this craziness with Lance McCullers. And I understand he hasn't pitched since the 2022 World Series. He's had all types of arm troubles. And sad for him. But in a game against the Reds the other day where he gave 7 runs in the first inning where the Reds scored 10 runs, and then all of a sudden he's getting death threats through social media? What? People, we got a lot more better things to do than to be keyboard warriors to Major League Baseball players. And that's just a sad state of affairs. I mean, really? To Lance McCullers, the guy has been injured for 2.5 years. He comes back, and all right, he's a far cry from his former self. Not to say that he was a perennial Cy Young Award winner, but we all know all the curveballs that he throws. Maybe that's put a lot of stress on his arm, we would think, considering that he hasn't been healthy since the World Series of 2022. But can we give the guy a break here? So to the Houston fans or baseball fans around, find something else to do. Because if that's what you're going to do, then please don't watch baseball at all. That's just awful on your part. So that's what I have there. And then some sad news where you had Chet Lemon, the former White Sox and Detroit Tiger outfielder who played on the 84 Tiger, a very revered and renowned team in the likes of baseball, or in the ranks of baseball, I should say. 35-5 to start off their season in 1984. They won a World Series against the Padres that year. Died at 70. Now, he suffered several strokes over the years. And although returned to Detroit for the 40th anniversary last year of their World Series championship, but I believe was in a wheelchair and not really doing too well. Way too soon, 70 years of age. Very good ball player. Had around 200 home runs, 700 some odd RBIs, batted .273 lifetime. Very good player, good defensive outfielder. But thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Lemon family, the Tigers, White Sox, Major League Baseball, etc. Way too soon for the former outfielder. And as far as the sport overall, you do have some interesting developments here from last week. And when we take a look at the standings, remember last week I talked about the AL Central being a division? Could it rank with the NL West? Now, of course, that could be a little clickbaity if you ask. And you know me, I'm not about clickbait titles. But I didn't come out to say that, oh, the AL Central is by far the best division in baseball. To me, that's a clickbait title. I'm just talking about the AL Central as far as them maybe being just as competitive, considering now what the Twins have done here, which has been, I want to say, miraculous. Now, granted, they beat the Tigers over the weekend, which kudos to them, as the Tigers have now hit the skids a little bit, as I pull up the standings here. But with the with the Twins' 8-game winning streak, they're now a game over 500. All right, they are 5 back of the Tigers in the division, but sandwiched in between, you have the Guardians, you have the Royals, who lost 2 out of 3 to the Red Sox over the weekend, as we talked about them being in Kansas City. But now you have 4 teams above 500, all right, barely for the Twins, but now are looking to see if they can get their hat in the ring as far as being a contender right before Memorial Day, 2 weeks exactly before the first holiday of the summer season. So give it up for the Twins and what they've done here to get themselves back. And then you have a scenario, speaking of the Central, where the St. Louis Cardinals, all right, albeit they beat up on the Nationals and Pirates. They did beat the Mets in the back 2 of that series last weekend. But now they've won 8 straight. They were 14-19 after losing to the Mets there 2 Fridays ago, where they had the rain out, then the double dip there on Sunday, but they haven't lost since. They're 22-19. They've won 8 straight, and now they look like a team just 1 game behind the Cubs in the NL Central, as a team that, dare I even say, could be in contention for the division. Now, the Cardinals have been awful. They started the year 3-0, as we know, and I believe they swept the Twins to start the year, and then since then, they've been a disaster. If you do the math, they were 11-19 from the time of that series opening sweep, or season opening sweep, and then now they've been on a roll to where they're 3 over 500 and a game back of the Cubs, where are we going to take them seriously at this point? I'll say no, but it is a division that could be up for grabs when it's all said and done, considering the Cubs have taken a couple steps back as they lost 2 out of 3 to the Mets over the weekend. And the Mets right now at 26-15, tops of the National League East. Now they do have a game lead in the loss over the Phillies, 1.5 overall. And the Mets schedule is going to get tricky. Now they have the Pirates coming in this week. All right, no big deal there. But then they play the Yankees in the first Subway Series, which I'll talk more about on Thursday. Then they go to Boston after that. And the Red Sox, been respectable. 2 games over 500 with a 2-game winning streak with that 2 wins coming at the expense of the Royals. And then after that, they have the Dodgers coming into Citi Field for a 3-game series. So after the Pirates, they have a 9-game stretch, which is going to get tricky. So you have to keep that in mind as they try to keep ahead of the Phillies there in the NL East. And then you have the NL West, which is a gauntlet right now. The Dodgers at 27-14, San Diego 25-14. The Giants coming off of that sweep, loss over the Twins 24-17. And then you want to throw in Arizona. Now they're 21-20. So they've taken a couple of steps back. But still, they're going to be in the hunt, you would think, at least for a wild card. But if things break right for them, maybe even for a division. And then when you look at the AL West, that is one that is also up for grabs. Mariners at 22-17. They had a rough weekend as they got swept by the Blue Jays at home. And now they have the Yankees coming to town as they beat the A's 2 out of 3 over the weekend. So between them, the Astros, who may not have Jose Altuve for a time as he has a hamstring issue. Then you also have the Athletics, even with them losing 2 out of 3. There are only 2 games, well, 3 in the loss, but 2 back in the division, as well as the Astros are. But of course, the Astros have the leg up 20-19, where the the Athletics are 21-20. Then you have the Rangers, who won the back 2 games in Detroit, 1 game under 500, and even the Angels aren't out of it, considering that there's 7 games under 500 and 6 back in the loss of the division lead. So baseball starting to take into shape. Once we get to Memorial Day, that will be the first barometer of the summer. Then you'll have the 4th of July and then Labor Day as we get through this marathon of a season with Major League Baseball. And to think, for most teams, we're already at the quarter pole of the season. That's right. Some teams have played 39 games, but there are quite a few that have played 40, 41. I don't think anybody's played 42 just yet. For instance, the Mets have played 41 games. The Red Sox have played already 42. They're 22-20. So you have a smattering of teams that have played 41, 42 games as we are already 25% into this baseball season. Now, let me look at the schedule for the week. For starters, what do we have here? Milwaukee at Cleveland. Boston at Detroit. Those are 2 good series there. St. Louis at Philadelphia, based on the Cardinal winning streak as they come up the Northeast corridor from D.C. to Philly. We talked about Pittsburgh and the Mets. Paul Skeens pitches tonight against David Peterson, for those who want to see the phenom there. Pitch out in Flushing. Washington and Atlanta. The Marlins are in Chicago. They actually lost 2 out of 3 to the White Sox over the weekend, so they stay in the Windy City to play the Cubs here. Colorado, after snapping their losing streak, are in Texas. Kansas City, Houston. Angels in San Diego. New York at Seattle, as you know. Arizona at San Francisco. Very interesting start there for the D-backs to try to get themselves back in the mix for the NL West. Then you have White Sox in Cincinnati starting tomorrow. Now that Minnesota, let me see. All right, Minnesota at Baltimore. That starts tomorrow. And other series, Tampa at Toronto. That is also tomorrow. A's at LA to play the Dodgers. And that's what you have there for baseball to open up our week as we get closer to the Memorial Day weekend. Let me see. Other news and notes in baseball that I missed? No, that is it. All right, now let me wrap up with the NFL. Another big week for the NFL because of the schedule. And you know what? I'll start there. Schedule released on Wednesday, which is good because in the past they usually release it on a Thursday, which means we could talk about it a little bit on Thursday's podcast. But the leaks are starting to trickle in slowly but surely. And let me see if I can get an up-to-the-second view of what the schedule may shake down here. Now, one thing's for certain, or as I see the Browns added DeMonte Kazee, the former Steelers safety. All right, so that just came through the wire. But the NFL, the season opener, as we all know, the team that wins the Super Bowl will have the home opener there that first Thursday of September, which this year will be September the 4th. And a lot of people were trying to think which team is going to be. Well, it's official now, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, to me, that is just a lame start, and the only reason why I say that, now, I don't know who the Eagles are going to play this year. Maybe let me see if I can bring up their opponents, because the schedule obviously will be in full bloom there, as we know. Eagles opponents in 2025. Here's what we have. Now, they could have started it this way, and why not? Now, again, you could save these games for down the road, and maybe they want to get the Cowboys out of the way because they don't know how good or how bad the Cowboys are going to be. But come on. The Detroit Lions, to start off the year in Philadelphia, would have been the primo way to start off the NFL season. So for them to pick the Cowboys, and I guess they're just banking on it with them being healthy. Dak Prescott, you want to bring in George Pickens to the mix to go along with CeeDee Lamb. All right, fine. But that is a lazy way to start off the year. And I understand the Cowboys, eyeballs to the set, it's America's team, etc. But I was hoping that you'd have a much more juicier matchup. And to me, Lions-Eagles is much better than Cowboys-Eagles. And I know the Cowboy fans and maybe NFL fans will get at me for that. But, and one more time, maybe they're saving that for a Sunday night down the road, Detroit and Philadelphia, at least so you think, or maybe a 425 Fox America's game. But And as you see here, as I'm looking, who should the Eagles open up the 2025 season against? And here are your opponents. All right, they're not going to put the Bears there. They're not going to put the Broncos there. The Commanders, all right, we've seen that with the NFC Championship game, and maybe they didn't want to put them there, and that's fine. You're not going to put the Giants there. No thanks. The Raiders, Rams, you could have put, but we've seen Rams, Philly in the past. Obviously, they played in the divisional round, which was a game that the Rams actually could have won. And you could have argued whether or not you could have put the Rams there. But to me, the no-brainer was the Lions. That would have been the best opener by far, matchup-wise, because you would have had the two heavyweights. And think about it. Those were the top two seeds in the NFC last year. So why not have them face off game one of what, 272 or whatever, how many games it is? But they dropped the ball. No sweat. They're going to have the Cowboys there instead. So watch that be a 31-17 type game where the Eagles will go away winning. But other than that, no other leaks as of yet. I'm sure you're probably going to hear some later today, tomorrow, Wednesday for sure. We know about some of the matchups in whether it be London, Frankfurt. Now you have a game in Ireland where the Steelers will play next year. So you have that to look forward to, which I don't. I hate the games overseas, as you know. And then the Brazil game, which is the Friday game, which I'm sure that'll be leaked before Wednesday night. I believe the schedule releases at 8 o'clock, so you have that to look forward to. And obviously, come Thursday, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the bigger picture, especially if you're in New Orleans. Now, you drafted Tyler Shough, the kid from Louisville, in the second round to possibly be a backup. Well, backup is not going to cut it anymore because the news came down on Saturday that Derek Carr, the incumbent, has to retire due to labrum issues and a rotator cuff in his right shoulder that may be even similar to what Drew Brees went through. Remember when he got injured on the final game as a member of the Chargers, I believe it was against the Broncos back in the 2006 season? If I'm not mistaken, it was at 05, heading into 06. Yeah, I think it was 05 into 06, if I'm not mistaken. And therefore, he signed with the Saints. How ironic, because Brees became an all-time great after leaving San Diego to go to New Orleans. But with Derek Carr having to retire because of those issues, and again, similar to Drew Brees, I don't know if it's exact, because Brees, I was early on in his career where he was able to correct it and fix it, and therefore had the career he had, where Carr, 34, 35 years of age, and to have that now and to rehab and to miss a whole year and to come back, the likelihood of him being anywhere close to what he once was, obviously was going to be against him. So now you have a situation where Tyler Shough went from backup quarterback, of course having to earn that, to now in the depth chart being a starter. And who knows what other reinforcements they're going to get, whether they're going to have to trade for somebody, whether they're going to have to get a backup of the likes of Gardner Minshew, which I don't believe is a free agent. Didn't he sign with the Chiefs there in the offseason? And for the Saints in a division that could be had, where the Buccaneers have won the last couple of years, the Falcons fell flat on their faces last year, and Carolina's still on the come up with Bryce Young. I don't know what they're going to do, because Tyler Shough, although a lot of people thought with his running ability and maybe he could be a guy that is the future of the franchise, well, that future has become the current and as of right this moment. So talk about his work being cut out for him. Tyler Shough, you are the man. Unless something happens here throughout the course of these next few months where they bring in somebody of note or somebody of at least some experience to be a guy that can work on the center instead of putting Shough there to start off the year. Granted that he still has to go through the mini camps, the OTAs, training camp, etc. So if you're by the bayou, what do? If I'm Mickey Loomis and the St. Brass, right now, I am manning the phones to see what I could do. But even then, it's not as if any team is going to trade their backup quarterback to you based on the events here with Derek Carr. So something to keep in mind as we move along here. Still a far cry and getting close, though. 2.5 months from training camp. But, can we certainly wait for training camp and an NFL season to come? You know what I'm going to say to that, people? This guy surely can. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just around the books, as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the Detroit Department of Life called sports. And as I say each and every closing, if you haven't subscribed, rated, reviewed on Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com, the website, or the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, shame on you. What are you doing? What have you done? Of course, I say that tongue-in-cheek, but in all seriousness, please do so. As an independent podcaster, content creator, I need all of the help that I could get. So if you could please take a screenshot, send it to your family, friends, foes, frenemies who like sports, love sports, casual sports fan, diehard sports fan, good sports fan, the kook of a sports fan like yours truly. And also take the screenshot, send it to me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or on Instagram at JAYREELZ. Of course, Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. Please do so. One more time. I'm doing this for the love, and I'm doing this full time. Trying to generate income, doing what it is that I love, being able to monetize this podcast, among other things. 2 podcasts a week on Mondays and Thursdays, as you know. A live stream on YouTube at JAYREELZ every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern time, as well as lifestyle vlogs, as well as fan interaction vlogs. And I have another one coming at you next week where I'll be at Yankee Stadium. More details to come on Thursday's podcast outside of the house that George built this Friday. And so many other things that I have on my plate with critique videos, critiquing various types of videos that are out there. What kind of videos, you may ask? Well, you have to stay tuned to find out. And the only way you're going to be dialed in is if you are connected to my social media and as well as the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. So please do so. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals. Because whether you do or do not know, one more time, this is what I love to do. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, as I like to say, talking sports since birth. With nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, and as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and this camera, you know I'm going to deliver it all. With my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings, with nothing but fire, passion, energy, and fury. With everything that goes on. The world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are. The JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.